Hi there, I'm Alicia Grabinski with Blue Sky. We're focusing on a story today that you likely were talking about with friends and family over the weekend. Jeremy Harrison has resigned as Saskatchewan government House Leader after revealing he did bring a long gun into the legislature. This comes a week after explosive allegations by the Speaker of the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly, Randy Weeks, during his final speech in the Assembly. So what exactly is happening in the legislature, and what does this mean for the sitting Saskatchewan party? We'll start our show today with a recap from the CBC's Adam Hunter. Then we have Meara Conway from the official opposition joining us live. And Tom McIntosh, a politics professor, will share some analysis too. You can get ready to call with your thoughts, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. But first, here's David Shield with the CBC News.
Thanks, Alicia. Good afternoon. The inquest into the death of Haven Dubois is now underway. The 14-year-old boy drowned in an East Regina creek in 2015. Dubois' death was deemed accidental, with marijuana as the contributing factor. An inquest is being held this week at the Royal Hotel in Regina. A jury of 4 men and 2 women were selected this morning. They are now sworn in, and witnesses are set to begin testifying. 13 witnesses are expected to be called during the inquest. It's scheduled to run until Thursday. Another Saskatchewan Party MLA is not seeking re-election. The party announced this morning Joe Hargrave is not running again this fall. He was elected MLA for Prince Albert Carleton in 2016. Hargrave currently serves as a Minister of Sask Builds and Procurement. He's also the minister responsible for the Global Transportation Hub and the Provincial Archives. Hargrave said in a news release after discussing with his family he can't commit to another 4 years. The Sask Party says it will nominate a new candidate for Prince Albert Carleton in the coming weeks. They'll be among the 22 Sask Party candidates running in this fall's provincial election. Saskatchewan continues to be in the midst of an overdose crisis. The latest numbers show 74 people are suspected to have died of drugs in the first 2 months of this year. Now, a pilot project in Saskatoon is being extended in hopes of helping to tackle those numbers. It's called the Overdose Outreach Team. A firefighter or paramedic and a health authority addictions worker reach out to people who have experienced overdoses. Riley Knock is the Saskatoon Fire Department's Director of Community Relations. He says experiencing an overdose can be very scary for people and their families.
Having somebody follow up and say, hey, we're just checking in. Are you okay? Is there anything we can help you with? Is there any services we can get you to? Can we teach you how to do some safety planning? All sorts of things like that. It's a small wins, and when somebody's interested in getting some of those services, I think that's kind of what keeps us going on the day-to-day.
Knock is happy to see the pilot extended. He hopes it will allow more firefighters and SHA workers to join the team. After months of job action, the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and the province have reached a tentative deal. A ratification vote is set for later this week, and this time the STF is backing the agreement. Charles Smith is a political science professor at the University of Saskatchewan. He finds this surprising. That's because he says some of the key issues that have prolonged negotiations are not properly addressed in the proposed agreement.
So my sense is there was a ticking clock. There was an incalcitrant employer who was not willing to move on these issues, and the STF felt this was the best deal they could possibly get.
Smith says it's hard to speculate on what led the STF to change its position. There is no mention of class size in the proposal, but there are promises of a task force on classroom complexity. The results of the vote are expected to be released on Thursday. At 3 minutes after 12 o'clock, it's 18 degrees in Regina, 17 degrees in Saskatoon. This is CBC News. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu admits something went tragically wrong during an Israeli airstrike yesterday. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 45 people were killed following the bombardment in Rafah. Mandy Sham has more.
What did those kids do wrong to die? Asks 23-year-old Amalek Filfel. Our future is destroyed, she says. The Palestinian is one of hundreds of thousands of civilians in Rafah, convinced that contrary to what Israel claims, there are no safe zones left in Gaza.
The IDF targeted 2 Hamas commanders in Rafah, whose hands were drenched in Israeli blood.
Government spokesperson Avi Hyman says initial reports suggest that strike may have triggered a fire which killed civilians in the area. Israel's military has ordered a probe, but a growing chorus of nations are demanding they do more than investigate. Top officials from the African Union and the EU are urging Israel to respect last week's binding ruling from the International Court of Justice. It ordered Israel to immediately halt its offensive in Rafah. Mandy Sham, CBC News, Toronto.
Police in Ontario's Peel region say they have recovered hundreds of stolen vehicles as a result of a months-long investigation. Their combined worth is around $33 million. 16 people have been arrested and charged, and 10 others are still wanted. Peel Police Chief Nishan Driappa says more charges are coming.
Let me be clear. We are laser focused on stopping those responsible and for holding them accountable.
Some of the suspects are as young as 16 years old. Police say criminals used family members to help ship stolen cars to the United Arab Emirates and Oman through the port of Montreal. And Leisha, that's the news at 12 o'clock.
David, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's David Shield. Let's go now to Ethan Williams, who's got the forecast for today. Hello, Ethan. Oh, I guess Ethan isn't quite with us. Well, what I can do is I can give you some current temperatures. I can recap the weekend. I participated in the Saskatchewan Marathon. There were 5,000 of us, more than 5,000, who participated in the race, and the weather was fantastic. We were so lucky. And today's kind of looking a little bit similar. So Regina right now is sitting at 17 degrees, wind northwest gusting up to about 42 kilometers an hour. And I will just quickly look up Saskatoon here. Saskatoon, you are sitting at 18 degrees. You've got a slight chance of showers today with a high of 20. Now, to elaborate on that, Ethan, I was just saying how nice the weekend was.
Yeah.
A lot of us did the Saskatchewan Marathon. Our whole crew here, we were given high fives. There's a group of us from CBC who participated, and the weather was perfect.
Yes.
It was freezing at first, and I had goosebumps. And then we started running, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm so glad it wasn't any warmer than this.
Yeah, I saw the photos you guys posted. Props to you guys for doing that, first of all.
Thanks.
That sounds like it was a fun time. Not every I basically just hurt my knee whenever I go walking anywhere. So running alone, that's quite the feat. So yes, glad the weather held up for you guys, and it did turn out to be a pretty nice weekend, really throughout the province for both days actually. Today we're in for another not too bad of a day, a little bit unsettled. Much of south and central today seeing a mix of sun and cloud with the chance of some showers. We are seeing a few of those popping up right now between Regina and Saskatoon, and a few of those showers could become some thunderstorms a little bit later into the afternoon as well, especially if you're in southern Saskatchewan or in west central parts of the province. Again, should stay non-severe for the most part, though. And a little bit breezy at times, especially if you're in Regina and southeastern Saskatchewan. Those winds up to around 40 kilometers an hour today, but nothing too strong. We're not really seeing a whole lot of systems around the province today, so not too much to pick up those gusts. Temperatures, rather, though, still going to be a bit below seasonal. We're still in that 15 to 20 degree range at Regina and Saskatoon. We should be getting up close to 20 degrees today. For northern Saskatchewan, pretty similar conditions here. Mix of sun and cloud for many areas. If you're in the far north, you'll likely see a little more sunshine today, and highs kind of in those mid-teens is what we're looking at. Tomorrow, though, Leisha, things really starting to warm up. We're seeing temperatures jumping into the mid, maybe even upper 20s, especially come Wednesday. Many of us looking at possibly close to 30 degrees in some locations, and lots of sunshine as well. So going to definitely be feeling like summer just before we start meteorological summer, which is coming quickly on June 1st.
Oh, yes, that's right. Ethan, thank you for this.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Ethan Williams. Right now in Regina, we're sitting at 17. Saskatoon is 18 degrees.
You're listening to Blue Sky with Leisha Grabinski. That's 102.5 FM in Treaty 4, 94.1 in Treaty 6, and 540 on the AM all across Saskatchewan.
Well, it is a wild time in Saskatchewan politics. The spring sitting of the Saskatchewan legislature ended with a bang.
Watch out! You might get what you're after. Cool babies, strange but not a stranger. I'm an ordinary guy, burning down the house.
Okay, well, he didn't burn it down, but House Speaker Randy Weeks did some serious damage during his final speech as Speaker of the House. He said Saskatchewan Party House Leader Jeremy Harrison has threatened and harassed him.
But more disturbing is his obsession with guns and his use of intimidation, both verbally and physically. His desire to get permission to carry a handgun in the Legislative Assembly is particularly disturbing. Another incident reported by a former special constable was when the government House Leader flaunted the rules concerning weapons when he brought a hunting rifle into the Legislative building.
So today on Blue Sky, we're going to catch you up on everything that's happened since those allegations were made, including the resignation of House Leader Jeremy Harrison. We'll hear from our political reporter, the opposition NDP, and a political science professor. And then at 12:30, we are opening the phone lines for you. Our question is, what do you make of this recent drama in the legislature? How does this affect the Sask Party heading into the next election? You can join the conversation at 12:30 by calling 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Adam Hunter covers politics for CBC Saskatchewan, and he's with us now in our Regina studio. Adam, hello.
Hello, Alicia.
Wow. Okay. So the days after the end of session are usually a bit slower, but not this time. Why don't you take us back to the last week of session? Bring people up to speed on what happened with House Speaker Randy Weeks.
Yeah, lots happened, and I was thinking about this today because it has been now 2 weeks almost since this all kind of went down. And leading up to the last day, Randy Weeks, there was sort of a sign that something was coming on the final day where we heard a bit of that speech. And the day before, he read a letter from the former Sergeant-at-Arms, Terry Quinn, that was about 3 years old. And for people that aren't familiar, the government passed a law, Bill 70, back in 2022. But previous to that, that was to change the security service at the legislature, take it from the independent watch of the Speaker and the Sergeant-at-Arms and his constables into a new security called the Legislative District Security Unit. And that was controversial at the time. We hadn't really heard from Terry Quinn after he was he stepped down as Sergeant-at-Arms. And Randy Weeks changed that. He read a letter from Mr. Quinn the day before the last day, so on the Wednesday, and also an email from Terry's wife. That night, Randy Weeks cut up his Sask Party card and put it on social media and said, "Enough is enough." And then the final day of the sitting, we had Randy Weeks introduce the president of the SDF, Samantha Beacott, in the gallery. And we all know that the government and the SDF have been involved in quite a back and forth over a contract over the last number of months. So that was also an interesting thing to see the Speaker do. And then finally, a 10-minute speech in the last moments of the sitting. He accused the government, both members of the government and their staff, of harassment and bullying. And Leisha, we have a bit more to play for the listeners.
Yeah, let's take a listen to some of that speech.
Another MLA rushed me at a party function, came very close to headbutting me. The government House Leader of the MLA from Meadow Lake showed signs of inappropriate behavior from the time he was first elected. Misleading statements and out-and-out lies. He has been called out numerous times. He expects his staff to go to his home, pick up his clothes. He has trouble keeping staff. There's a revolving door of staff coming and going. But more disturbing is his obsession with guns and his use of intimidation, both verbally and physically. His desire to get permission to carry a handgun in the Legislative Assembly is particularly disturbing. Another incident reported by a former special constable was when the government House Leader flaunted the rules concerning weapons when he brought a hunting rifle into the Legislative building. He owns many weapons, including a 223 AR style 4-shot clip, lightweight, which looks like an assault weapon. Weapons like these can be easily converted to more than 4 shots. As I stated before, my experience with the government House Leader includes threatening gestures. Whenever I rule against him in the Assembly, he will start yelling at me and standing up and flashing his suit jacket. As the gestures and behavior became more aggressive, I worried that he might be carrying a handgun. My concerns over his mental stability and his obsession with guns was only confirmed when he heckled after the passing of the motion to devolve all relevant parts of the Firearms Act to the province. He twice yelled, open carry next.
So, Adam, obviously that's a pretty shocking speech, hey?
Yes, and in the gallery watching, you was you could hear a pin drop until the moment where he said he could be carrying a handgun. Then you can hear some gasps from the crowd there and the members that were seated there. So, to give people some background on Randy Weeks, Leisha, he's a 25-year MLA and represented the Sask Party since 1999. So he's been there a long time. He's represented bigger Sask Valley up until December when he lost the nomination there. And it's a new, the map got redrawn, so it's kind of a new area, similar to what he was representing, but also a bigger chunk of what he wasn't representing in Kindersley area. So he lost that nomination. And we've heard, since then that there's, maybe some sour grapes, that maybe Randy Weeks is upset that because of the nomination loss, and the speaker is isolated as well, that you're, even though you are a part of the party caucus, you are spending a lot of time doing your role as a speaker and taking that role seriously. And Randy Weeks is now the second speaker in a row who will have to be replaced, as Mark Docherty didn't seek re-election, and that caused a by-election in Coronation Park in Regina. People may recall that.
Right. And so, yes, there have been these allegations of sour grapes and by some party members, and some people say, like, he has known about a lot of this stuff for a decade. What, though, Premier Moe was upset about how these allegations were made public. I think that's why we're hearing that phrase, yes, sour grapes. Let's listen to some of what Premier Scott Moe had to say.
I did follow up a little bit with the member that many of the accusations were directed at, and it's I've been informed that they are all unequivocally false. Unequivocally false.
Okay, so one thing I do want to make clear here is that these allegations were originally denied, right, Adam?
Yes, and that's from Premier Moe on May 17th. So right after that happened on the Thursday, we had a scrum with Premier Moe where the media asked him questions. He said he didn't know anything really about this. Premier Moe was also not in the legislature in his chair when Randy Weeks made his speech. He wasn't in the room at the time. So he came out and said, I haven't heard everything. I'm getting up to speed on this. But he said, I'm not familiar with any of these gun allegations, let's say. The following day, there was a small cabinet shuffle. We had another media availability with the Premier, and that's where that clip comes from, where he says, these things are unequivocally false. He also said, that he was confused as to why Randy Weeks didn't come forward, Leisha, and say, hey, why didn't you make some of these points earlier? If you're so worried about things like harassment and bullying, you should have come forward and told us this. And so I think that is, was the main concern from the Premier from the start, that, this is kind of new to us. But to take people back, a couple of weeks earlier, Randy Weeks did read a text in the House by the finance minister where she kind of said, you're letting the House get away from you. That was a bad ruling. And he said, this is among the hundreds of texts that I get from government that they send to the clerks, they send to myself, and then a couple of weeks ago we heard again that same allegation about more texts.
So that gets us up to May 17th, and at this point we haven't heard anything from Jeremy Harrison himself, right?
That's correct, and we've been asking for Jeremy Harrison. We asked for Jeremy Harrison, right after Randy Weeks made those allegations in the House. We asked for him again last Thursday. I know I did personally, and then we heard from him on Friday as well.
Right, and we'll get to that. But
yes,
in the meantime, we had the official opposition, the NDP, calling for an investigation, right, based on the allegations that Randy Weeks made.
Yeah, and there was some concerns raised by the opposition leader, Carla Beck, about looking into these allegations, the harassment and bullying, and also some of the gun allegations that the Premier should be taking it more seriously, as he kind of sloughed it off in the first scrum we had in the first availability, the premier said, well, this is, sour grapes of someone who lost the election. He said, sorry, this is a sore loser sort of thing, that he should have come up with this and come forward earlier, and he didn't. And I'm curious as to why.
Okay, so then this gets us to about Friday morning, right? Where that's when you and Murray Mandrick, our Leader Post, our Phoenix columnist, you're on the morning edition together for your weekly political chat. So I want to play some of that for our listeners. Here is Murray speaking about Premier Scott Moe's response to the allegations by Randy Weeks.
His story seems to be shifting like the sands. All of a sudden, we're going from sour grapes that he's not saying anymore to something else. Now he's worried about Randy Weeks' health. Well, how worried were you when your MLAs were sending him thousands of texts? And
the Premier said yesterday he was worried about Randy Weeks' health?
I think that it was yesterday.
Yeah, on Friday he said it, and then yesterday he said, I wish him well. I hope he's well in the future. So, yeah, it was
what's
very
the implication there? Look, let's think about it, folks. We have Jeremy Harrison. On any given moment, he stands up in the House. Any slight related to what an opposition member said, if they said that this doesn't seem factually correct or anything else, he's demanding an apology. He does that every day. He hops up like a spring gopher out of his hole every day just to basically make these comments. Why would he not have stood up immediately in the House? What would be your reaction if someone suggested something incredibly salacious or incredibly untrue? If that was the case, he'd be standing up and demanding the Speaker apologize. He'd be standing up and demanding his time to do so. Instead, he sat there and played on his phone during this whole thing, which was kind of telling to me in terms of, well, that's an odd reaction for someone that's leveling a whole bunch of serious allegations. You get mad over absolutely nothing. Why aren't you getting mad right now? It doesn't seem to make much sense to me. If it's not true, then go out and say it's not true. I don't know if it's not true. I don't know if he parked his car in front of the legislature, jumped out in hunting fatigues, walked up past the front desk and basically with a gun and carried on elsewhere. How would I know? But someone actually can say or prove that's not true. And by the way, actually several people can, one of them being Jeremy Harrison.
And then just hours later, things changed. What happened, Adam?
Yeah, literally hours later,
Yeah.
like not very long after that, we knew that Jeremy Harrison had an availability in Meadow Lake. That's his home constituency. And as I said, we'd requested him for a few days and hadn't heard from him. And so there was arrangements made to have a reporter in the Meadow Lake area ask some questions on our behalf. And eventually that audio came back to us, and it got spread to the rest of the media. And he eventually announced that morning before that media availability that he had resigned for not telling the premier about bringing a gun, which he said was a long gun, into the legislature about 10 years ago. He said about a decade ago. He said he had to go back and check in with some family and ask the questions about this once this was raised. And he still maintains his position as the cabinet minister and the minister for trade and export development, but he's no longer the government house leader.
And then what did he say when he addressed media in Meadow Lake?
And so, yeah, he said he was asked a few questions, and we're going to play some of that. But the questions he was asked is, did you bring, why didn't you disclose that you brought a hunting rifle or a long gun into the house? Did you ask for permission to bring in a handgun? And what do you make of the allegations of harassment and bullying?
Okay, let's listen to his answers.
I didn't recall that this happened. It was over 10 years ago. I actually don't know the exact year even, but it was 10 years ago approximately. I didn't recall it. I had some conversations with family, and I did then recollect, based on that conversation, a couple of conversations that I did recall after that. And I let the premier know. It was after he had already made public comments on all of it, and I offered my resignation to him as House Leader based on that recollection. And, as I said, it was a mistake. It was a lapse in judgment. I shouldn't have done it. I didn't even think about it when it happened. And it was literally, driving out to a hunting trip and stopped for a very short period of time. Security were aware that I brought my long gun into the assembly, and I did it because I didn't want to leave it in a parked vehicle in a parking lot, which is not something that you should do. But I should have just not stopped at the building. But I did, and I made the decision at that point that I would bring it in because it was, a short period of time, and security were aware. And based on that, I left shortly thereafter and went hunting, and that was the only time it's ever happened. And like I said, I unequivocally deny all of the other allegations that were made by the Speaker. They are entirely untrue.
That is Jeremy Harrison addressing media from Meadow Lake. We'd like to hear your reaction to everything you've heard so far. We will be opening the phone lines in about 5 minutes, and so you can give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. I'll let you know, too, that we're live streaming this show on our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube page, and one of our guests is the CBC's Adam Hunter. Adam, we're going to hear from the opposition right away here, but this does leave some pretty big questions about who will be the next House leader for the Saskatchewan party. When will we know this?
Well, that'll be, kind of an interim position. I'm guessing we have an election coming up, and that the dust will settle in the election, and whoever wins the election will have to decide on their House leader. But for the time being, because the House isn't in right now, the deputy House leader has been Lori Carr, the MLA for Estevan, also a cabinet minister herself. So I would assume that will be her job for the next couple of months, because the House isn't sitting. There's no, great need, I don't think. And then your guest may be able to correct me, but right now, first for that position to be filled.
Seems like a pretty thankless job right now. I don't know who would want that job. I just want to play a clip for you, another one from your Morning Edition political panel segment with Marie Mandrick on Friday. Let's take a listen.
It kind of makes me wonder who's going to want to be the next speaker.
Not me.
I'm going to get elected first.
Yeah, got to get elected first. Who would want the job? Quite honestly, it's a great question.
Like there's a mock dragging up of the speaker, right? Historically,
It'll be real
this time the opposition and the government dragging the speaker to the chair might be for real, because what a thankless job it would seem to be, given what we've heard in terms of...
Well, under other circumstances, I'd say you have to put a gun to their head, but I don't think I will this
but maybe not this time.
I don't even know if I want to laugh at that. But,
yeah, well, we were laughing. So, I think, and to get back to the allegation, the one allegation that Jeremy Harrison points out, Leisha, that's, he's really been steadfast about is the wanting permission to bring a handgun in. And your next guest will get into that, some of the questions they'd asked. But, the thankless job I think we're referring to is the speaker. And the speaker has kind of it's a bit of a dreaded position now. We had Corey Tucker, who's now an MP, is the speaker. Mark Doherty has left. Now Randy Weeks has lost his nomination. And, that one of the deputy speakers has stepped down recently, as of today, actually. So the news keeps on coming in.
Mm-hmm. And your job's not done today, too, right? We're expecting a cabinet shuffle. So when will we know more about that?
Yeah, and we're expecting kind of a mini one again. A couple weeks ago, Gord Wyant, he stepped down from cabinet because he's not running for re-election. And Colleen Young was made Minister of Advanced Education. We just got the news today that Joe Hargrave, even though he was acclaimed as the candidate in Prince Albert, he is not going to seek re-election. So he's in cabinet right now, so he'll have to be replaced, and we're assuming that'll be the announcement the Premier's making in about an hour or so. So we'll find out at that time.
Okay. Well, Adam, I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Anytime.
That is the CBC's Adam Hunter. He covers politics for us here at CBC Saskatchewan. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You are listening to Blue Sky on CBC Radio 1. You might be streaming it on our CBC Listen app, or you could be watching it live on our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube page. We're live there. And in a moment, we'll be hearing from Meara Conway with the official opposition. You can call us in a bit here, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email us, bluesky@cbc.ca. We want to hear your reaction to this and where you think this leaves the Saskatchewan party as we are about to head into a fall election. Let's take a moment to check in with the CBC's David Shield. David, what is making news today?
An inquest has begun looking into the death of a teenager in Regina. Haven Dubois drowned in a creek in the city in 2015. The 14-year-old's death was deemed accidental, with marijuana as a contributing factor. Saskatchewan teachers will be voting on a new contract later this week. Professor Charles Smith says it's surprising the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation endorsed the contract. He says issues like classroom size and complexity aren't properly addressed in the proposed agreement. And thousands of residents of Fort Nelson, British Columbia are starting to return home today. An evacuation order for the Parker Lake wildfire has been downgraded to an alert. About 4,700 people from the region have been out of their homes for over 2 weeks. And I'll have a full newscast for you coming up at 1 o'clock.
David, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's David Shield. I'm Leisha Grabinski. Let's go to our next guest here on Blue Sky. The official opposition is asking for an investigation. This was on Thursday. Opposition NDP ethics and democracy critic Meara Conway sent letters to the chief firearms officer and security officials at the legislature. Ms. Conway joins us right now. Welcome back to Blue Sky.
Thanks for having me, Leisha.
So obviously a lot happened after you sent those letters. I'm wondering what questions and what kind of accountability you're looking for now from the Premier on the allegations and now this admission from Jeremy Harrison that he did bring a long gun to the legislature a decade ago.
Yeah, I think that the events of the last, 48 hours only kind of add urgency to our sense of wanting answers. We're not at all satisfied with Jeremy Harrison resigning as House Leader. As Adam Hunter just, outlined, the House is no longer sitting. We're about to go into an election. This is kind of like kicking the star of the football team off the football team in his grade 12 year after the season is over. It's not good enough. This is still someone who has a place in their caucus at the cabinet table. He's still a senior minister. It's just unacceptable. I think back to when Nadine Wilson lied about her vaccination status. She was kicked out of caucus. She gave her resignation from caucus, and Mr. Harrison is still Minister of Trade and Export. It's not acceptable in our view. The events that have transpired indicate that either the Premier lied or Jeremy Harrison lied. It can be both, but it can't be neither. And so we're certainly not satisfied. We're going to keep trying to get to the bottom of what's happened here.
And how will you do that? Like, what kind of an investigation would you like to see into this?
So we're waiting to hear back from our letters. I anticipate that we will get responses quickly to all of these letters, and we will be thinking through exactly, how that investigation should take place. We've been very clear from the beginning there should be an investigation. The Premier's made it very clear that he is not going to take additional action. And now, we have confirmation that Jeremy Harrison did in fact bring a gun into the legislature. How
did you react to that?
I was not at all surprised that you hear rumors, obviously, but I think what's really shocking to me is the Premier's failure to kind of take this all seriously from the beginning. These were serious allegations coming from, a member of their own party, a 25-year Sask Party MLA, someone who's respected. And for him to just dismiss this as sour grapes was concerning from the get-go. It didn't feel right. It didn't look right. It wasn't right. Today we're even more of that view, particularly given, we know that some of the text messages were bullying. We've got receipts on that. Jeremy Harrison, like the text that he sent to Randy Weeks, totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
What made it unacceptable for maybe people who haven't been following all the details that closely? What made that unacceptable?
So the speaker is a neutral. They're supposed to be the decision maker, the umpire in there. They do come from one party or the other, but then they take an oath to kind of not bring that partisan view into being the speaker. They're the referee. I was a lawyer in a previous life. I would never text message or email a judge if I was unhappy with his ruling. The Premier, mentioned that he received hundreds of texts from Jeremy Harrison. One of them he read into the record, which is, that was an absolute bullshit ruling. Sorry, I hope we can say that on air. Just a totally inappropriate response to the speaker giving a ruling. We would never dream of doing that, I know, on our side. So there, in and of itself, that's inappropriate behavior. Now we have the gun allegation turns out to be true.
Does the gun change anything for you? I'm thinking of how the legislature is a place where the public can go. There are kids groups that tour through there. I'm just wondering if that changed anything for you. How much weight do you put on that in particular? I mean, there were a lot of allegations that came from Randy Weeks, but the fact that there was an admission that he brought a long gun into the legislature, does that change anything for you?
There's two things to that. There's the conduct in and of itself, totally inappropriate to bring your gun to work, let alone if your workplace is the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan. It's not lost on me that this is the same individual that pushed and pushed to have security answerable to his government, as opposed to being sort of a neutral third party, impartial body. But then I guess the other aspect, Leisha, to it was the dishonesty. I don't believe for a second that Jeremy Harrison didn't catch this allegation. I watched him intently while Randy Weeks read his comments into the record. He was listening. He was on his phone. The idea that he missed this allegation is very difficult for me to believe. And then the idea that he would have forgotten bringing a gun to work is even more so. So it's the dishonesty, and then it's the conduct itself that is very concerning.
What impact do you think this could have on people who may have had an interest in getting into politics? I mean, hearing about the back and forth here, it just doesn't feel like a great place to work. Do you have thoughts on that, on what impact this could have on people who may have had an interest in getting into politics?
Yeah, I think that, when you think about the fact that cynicism around politics is at an all-time high, this is, I referred to it as a soap opera, the Sask Party soap opera last week. This is the kind of thing that absolutely turns people off. And I think we've been seeing a lot of it from this government, like lurching from scandal to scandal, crisis to crisis. People have a lot of challenges. The people of Saskatchewan, whether it's in education, healthcare, whether it's, the single access point to Cumberland House being inaccessible as we speak, Saskatchewan people are struggling. There are no shortage of challenges. And instead of focusing on those things, you have these kinds of antics going on. I don't think it feeds people's sense of trust and like their government has their best interests at heart.
Meara Conway, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leisha.
That is Meara Conway, the opposition NDP ethics and democracy critic. I'm Leisha Grabinski. This is Blue Sky on CBC Radio 1. We've got some callers ready to share their reaction, but I also want to introduce you to Tom McIntosh in the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Regina. He's been listening into the show so far, and so before we get to our callers, Tom McIntosh, I want to know what you make of what you've been hearing so far.
Well, this is just, it's a fascinating story, and it was shocking when I first heard the news myself. It does just strike me as remarkably irresponsible. Even if the gun, as I read in one report, was properly cased and everything, someone who was a minister went walking through the halls of the legislature to his office to do work carrying a firearm. And it's just wildly inappropriate. One of the things I noted was apparently this was 10 years ago. 10 years ago was also when we had the gunman on Parliament Hill in 2014. And, there have been a number over the years, not many, thankfully, incidents where guns in legislatures have resulted in people's deaths for a whole variety of both political and political reasons. And so I can't imagine what went through someone's head, or why you would not, if you absolutely felt it would be unsafe to leave it in your vehicle, why you would not leave the gun with security at the legislature and say, here it is, hold it for me. I have to run to my office. I'll come back and take it from there. Or perhaps even have security meet you at your car and take possession of the firearm if you don't want to leave it in your car. It's just remarkably irresponsible. And, to sort of echo what the leader of the opposition said, you've taken away his position as House leader. The House isn't sitting, and there'll be an election before it sits again. So there's really not much of a punishment in that he remains a minister and a member of the caucus, and people have been removed from this caucus for what I would say to be somewhat lesser offenses.
So why do you think, and I know this is just speculation, but why do you think he wasn't removed? Like, why would Premier Moe take this tactic?
Well, to my mind, it does speak to, and it go back to sort of the Premier's original sort of quite forceful statement that this was that what the speaker had said was completely false, or that there is a sort of, we know what's right and wrong. We can, there is a kind of sort of digging in and arrogance right now about the government that is a little disconcerting. And, it's not, you see this in governments that have been in power for a very long time. They tend to view their position as now their right, as opposed to having been an elected government that can be unelected at some point. And so there is, I think it was a kind of hubris and arrogance that, oh, well, this is a minor little thing. And quit bothering us about it. And so we'll take away the House leadership. But and who's to say he doesn't get reappointed as House leader after the election?
Yeah. Let's find out what some of our listeners think. I am speaking with Tom McIntosh, professor in the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Regina. Tom, don't go anywhere. I've got more questions for you. But I want to hear from Keith, who joins us on the line right now in Saskatoon. Hello, Keith.
Hello, thanks for taking my call. There's so much, but I'm going to keep it real short so other people can get in. Sask Party was created so the Conservatives could distance themselves from the corruption of Grant Devine's government. 12 of his MLAs had criminal charges, and some even went to jail. Meara has had 2 drunk driving convictions, 1 killing a person, and currently he's breaking blatantly federal taxation laws. Bill Boyd, who came from Devine's government, has had 2 convictions regarding the environment, and there are other MLAs with criminal charges. Do they think they're above the law? It sure seems like it to me.
Keith, thanks for calling. And I'm not certain about all of that. I think there was 1 drunk driving offense, and the other may have been I'm not sure what the offense was, but the stop sign. Tom, do you want to weigh in on that? Just the history of party members and their relationship with the law?
Again, there's, without going back through all of this, every government will, especially over time, the longer you're in office, you're going to have some people who do something wrong, whether it's a criminal act of some kind in their private life, whether it's some egregious act as a minister, whether some of them are corrupt or not. What marks in my view as a political scientist, what marks a good government is a government that acts in those instances swiftly, clearly, and consistently to distance themselves from those people. And, you do see this on occasion. We saw Nadine Wilson lie about her vaccination status. She was almost immediately removed from caucus. We were in the midst of a pandemic. It was clear. It was meant to send a signal. That's the way I think the public expects the government to act. Every government, especially a government that's been in power as long as this one, will have people who run afoul of some set of rules, whether it's in the legislature or whether it's in their private lives. It's always incumbent on the government to act swiftly and decisively and sort of consistently to uphold the principles upon which they were elected.
I want to bring in another person to the conversation, but I just want to the clarification I was trying to give earlier. It was 1997 when Scott Moe had been ticketed for failing to come to a complete stop and driving without due care and attention. So I just wanted to provide that clarification for folks. But the other person I wanted to bring into the conversation is someone I spoke with a couple days ago. Jonathan Malloy holds the Honourable Dick and Ruth Bell Chair in Canadian Parliamentary Democracy, also professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. It is fair to say that what's been going on at the Saskatchewan legislature has caught the attention of political watchers across the country like him. So I caught up with him earlier and asked him for his reaction to what is going on at the Saskatchewan legislature.
Well, I'm watching from afar, but I certainly did hear about and watch the Speaker's dramatic intervention in the House last week. And I've been following a bit the story of the Premier, now the Minister, or the House Leader resigning. But from afar, I mean, it's, I'm not tuned enough to Saskatchewan politics to know exactly what's all going on, other than it's all pretty unprecedented. We haven't seen this sort of thing where a speaker sort of has spoken out so much recently, and then also the other people have pushed back against the speaker. You don't see that too often.
Yeah, and based on your expertise, I've got a few questions. So the allegations that Speaker Randy Weeks brought forward of harassment and bullying by the House Leader, should that be investigated? What do you think should be the next steps here?
Well, that's a really difficult question there. I mean, these are serious allegations. When it comes to the legislatures, the rules are always a little different. There's aspects of parliamentary privilege, but in this case, bringing in firearms into the legislature, etc., that should be investigated in some way. I gather there's been some discussion on things there, but yeah, I mean, these are serious allegations, and serious allegations should at least be looked into.
What do you think this means for the next person who does the job of House Speaker?
Well, I think being speaker is always a difficult job. We see that in any legislature. You are essentially the referee of the chamber, and just like with sports, the hockey game or something, people tend to get mad at the referee if their side isn't doing well. Both sides are way there, but certainly, I mean, it really suggests that there's something in the Saskatchewan legislature, and that's where I'm sitting here far from Ottawa. That there's a concerning culture, that it sort of could get to this, and exactly what happened and so on. That seems to be a little bit up in the air, but it really doesn't sound like there's a good relationship between the government and the speaker, and that's just a larger cultural issue in the legislature.
What precedent does this set, do you think?
Well, I don't think necessarily sets any sort of particular precedent. I mean, just looking in the far, it looks like there's a number of issues at work here, including the speaker's own nomination and other areas there. I don't really know what's all going on there. And so it's kind of an exceptional situation. But at the same time, it's really concerning that the relationship between the speaker and the government can break down this far, that these sorts of accusations are flying around. And again, that suggests there's a larger cultural problem in the Legislative Assembly, which may continue after the next election.
Are you seeing issues like this or anything similar like this across the country, where the speaker does find him or herself in a position like this, where things are so heated? Is there anything that you can draw on from another part of the country?
Well, I'm not aware of anything like this. It's really about questions of intimidation and physical violence, et cetera, there. But I mean, look at Ottawa right now. Look at the House of Commons and the current speaker, Mr. Fergus, who was a strong Liberal partisan before he became speaker. And at least a couple of times now, there's been issues where he's been involved in rather partisan things. And so the Conservatives in particular have always said they really have no confidence in Mr. Fergus as speaker. They're basically trying to remove him for partisan bias. So it's not these sorts of physical actions that are alleged in Saskatchewan, but that's the case of a speaker who has really lost the confidence of at least the major opposition party because of perceived excessive partisanship.
How do you think voters may react to what we're seeing in our legislature here?
Well, that's particularly difficult for me to say, obviously, sitting here in Ottawa. Say that generally voters don't pay a lot of attention to what happens in legislative institutions when it comes to election time. I'm sure the story has had a lot of play in Saskatchewan, though, so it's caught people's notice more than most cases. But the government has defended himself. The Premier has largely defended the House Leader, as I've understood. The House Leader has resigned there. So whether or not it becomes an issue in the election, that's hard for me to say. And my sense is that it may die down.
Professor
Today.
Malloy,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your
Well,
thoughts
thank you.
today. Thank you. Jonathan Malloy holds the Honourable Dick and Ruth Bell Chair in Canadian Parliamentary Democracy and is professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. We have Tom McIntosh with us in our Regina studio. He's from the Department of Politics and International Studies at the U of R. And so, Tom, what do you think are the broader implications, political implications are here?
Well, I think, Jonathan, I didn't know he was going to be on. He's an old friend of mine. It was fun to hear him. I think Jonathan raised some interesting points that I think really where the focus should shift to going forward is, one, the idea that we need to sort of investigate, but also to begin to think about, what is the culture in that legislature that is leading to this? Jonathan said people don't spend much time paying attention to the legislature. That's generally quite true. It's certainly not the case in Saskatchewan in recent weeks, beginning with the Speaker's farewell speech and really shots across the bow of the government, where some very serious accusations were made that speak, leaving aside, particular texts and who sent how many texts and whatnot. Just the very idea that you're texting the Speaker because you disagree with them and all of that. It does speak to sort of a breakdown in the relationship between the Speaker and the government.
Mhm.
It says something about what appears to be a rather sort of toxic culture inside the legislature, and that needs to be addressed seriously because and I think Adam and Murray talked about this in the earlier clips, that who is going to want this job? This is a tough job anyway. You have to give up your role as a partisan, which is presumably one of the reasons why you stood for the legislature, to play this very important role of the referee inside the House. And I could see it being difficult to get someone of the kind of caliber you need to do that job. And you do need someone who can set aside their partisan differences, because every Speaker has to rule against the party that brought them to the legislature at some point. And you need to be able to trust them, and the opposition needs to be able to trust them. And if that's broken down irreparably, it makes the legislature harder and harder to govern.
I want to bring in one of our callers into the conversation. So Joe is in Regina. Joe, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you. Yeah, just one thing that hasn't come up yet that I do want to, I think needs to be mentioned is I guess I can do this on my behalf. Obviously, I can't do it anybody else's, but I want to apologize to the Speaker, Mr. Weeks, for what he's gone through clearly, and to tell him it took tremendous courage for him to come forward and bring forward what he had to bring, and because it was important that he do this. And I think we need to think a little bit about what he's going through and the courage that it took for him to do that. So I just put a line underneath that one. And I just want to make a few comments. I worked for provincial government for over 30 years and in some senior positions. So I know governments, at least the provincial governments here, quite well for both parties. I voted for both parties, although I'm quite concerned with this current government and where they've been, probably, I'll say, for the last term and probably term and a half. But in terms of Minister Harrison, and I hope he's not minister for long, the fact that his portfolio is trade and export and international relations, what does this say to our international and national clients? In terms of how this province is operating. So I think that's a piece as well that's important. The other one is we're kind of concentrating on Harrison, and that's fine. But I would like to say that that party, when that gun came into the legislature, nobody can convince me, I'll never know probably, nobody can convince me that other members of current government did not know about that. In particular, the Premier. There's no way I can believe that somebody bringing a gun would go unnoticed. Clearly, Minister Harrison has been dishonest, and this and many other times that I've seen, at least in my opinion. And I think we need to understand that this is more than Harrison. This goes across the current party and goes right up to the leader. If you're the leader, you're responsible. And I think he needs to take responsibility for this and not say, oh, he didn't tell me. I don't for a minute believe that that's the case.
Joe, I appreciate you calling with those thoughts. We've got a few people waiting on the line, so I appreciate you sharing, and I'm going to move to the next caller. But Joe, thanks.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Joe in Regina. Let's go to Wayne in Swift Current. Hi, Wayne.
Good afternoon. All of these things that are going on right now with different MLAs on the Sask Party side of the government, and currently with Minister Harrison, it's just symptomatic. We went through it. I went through it. I, too, was a senior bureaucrat for 25 years, and I saw it happen firsthand with the Grant Devine government. And what's happening is that they become lazy and arrogant and at ease. They've been in power for so long that nothing's going to go wrong. They do as they please. And the polls, unfortunately, are showing very little shift to the other side, to the NDP. And so I'm not surprised of what has happened. But we'll see in the fall, won't we, how much the common Jane and Joe of this province really do pay attention. I think more people will pay attention as more comes out, just like they did in the last 4 months of the Grant Devine administration. Thanks for the great show. Thanks.
Thanks, Wayne. We've got time for just a couple more callers, so I'll try to keep it, if I can ask you all to keep it short. Dwayne in Carrot River joins us right now. Hi, Dwayne.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on this. I think that as a longtime hunter safety instructor, no one but a fool would leave their shotgun in the trunk of their car. So he was right in doing that. The only mistake I can see is he must have had to go past the sergeant of arms, and he should have said, this is why I'm doing this, and the sergeant of arms would have locked it up. But if we can't trust a minister to put a shotgun in his room and lock the door while he's going about business, there's something wrong. I'm really amazed at this stage in Saskatchewan where we have homeless people dying, we have people who are starving on the streets, we have lineups at food banks. This is the issue that the NDP and the Sask Party, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, Dwayne, I appreciate you calling. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. We'll quickly go to Dave in Regina. Dave, you've got about 30 seconds. What's on your mind after listening to all of this?
Thanks very much. Hi, Tom McIntosh. One group we've not heard from and who will have the ultimate say in Minister Harrison's future are the voters and electors of Meadow Lake constituency. What are they going to think of the representation that's being provided by their MLA, Jeremy Harrison? I realize that he may be removed from his trade and export development portfolio. Maybe he should be out of caucus. I don't think that'll happen. But the voters of Meadow Lake should be talked to, should be asked and consulted with, and they have, as far as I'm concerned, have maybe the final judge and jury of Jeremy Harrison's career. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. Good way to kind of wrap things up there. That was Dave in Regina. Tom, do you want 20 seconds to say your last little bit here before we wrap up today? We've covered a lot of ground, but anything else that you want to say before we let you go?
Yeah, I think, it will be the voters of Meadow Lake that will have the, at least, if not the last word on Jeremy Harrison, the second to last word. The question will be what happens after the election and whether he's back in cabinet and in what role.
Yeah, okay. Interesting stuff, and it feels like we've only got a few months. It's a ways to go yet before the election, but it will be here in no time. So, Tom, I know we'll talk again. I always appreciate it when you're able to make some time for Blue Sky, so thank you.
Always happy to do the show.
It's Tom McIntosh. He's the professor in the Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Regina. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You've been listening and watching Blue Sky. We were live on YouTube today, so you'll be able to find it there later today on demand to watch it when you want. You can just search for our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube page. And you can always find episodes of Blue Sky as well on our CBC Listen app for you to listen on demand. Now, coming up on our next show, few professions are as dependent dependent on the weather as farming. And so we'll be checking in with some farmers during seeding to see how they're trying to adapt to climate change. We'll also hear about the work being done at the Global Institute of Food Security to make crops that are more resistant to drought. And so if you're a farmer in Saskatchewan, we'd especially like to hear from you tomorrow. So you can join the conversation between 12 and 1 on CBC Radio 1. Have a wonderful afternoon.